You're listening to the Diginauts on the Good Talk Podcast Network.
Hello, everybody. This week on the Diginauts CES. What was the coolest technology stuff revealed in Nevada this year?
DNA-modified babies to avoid catastrophic diseases.
And has a robot taken your job? Maybe our government should help you out, like the government of Finland is about to do. We'll talk about that and much more coming up on the Diginauts. Society,
The future,
morality,
disruption,
policy,
humanity,
innovation,
technology, morality, the future, very long.
and it's like, no, I don't wear a circlet of gold around my head on a regular basis, so I'm cool, thanks.
Diginauts.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Diginauts. You found us again. Good job. Thank you. My name is Darren.
And I'm Eric.
We are here, as we are almost every week, to discuss technology and society with you. How's it going, Eric? What's going on in the world in our new year?
Yeah, great question. One thing that's top of mind in this segment, more and more doctors and society are faced with the challenges of DNA and altering that DNA. And in this instance, some doctors are basically saying that there's definitely some serious risks by altering DNA to prevent an inherited disorder.
Serious risks you don't say. DNA, yeah. We know a lot more about DNA than we once did, right? Like we can go sequence a full-on person in whatever it is, a week and a half, or I don't know. I haven't done it.
Or like grow an ear somewhere.
Right. We're figuring some stuff out. Clearly the trends are exponential. That said, the average person on the street probably doesn't even know the word, certainly not what it stands for or what it does or like anything beyond high school biology. I remember there's 4 codons or whatever. And that's about it. So getting in and it feels like one of those sort of rocket science brain surgery kind of things. Like it's cutting edge, smart people stuff.
Oh, without a doubt.
So I'm not surprised that, oh, hey, by the way, we got to be careful when we do this.
Yeah, it's not just making seedless grapes or, rectangular watermelons.
Right. So what story do we have today that involves DNA?
Yeah, so came across a story from NPR where in September, a reproductive doctor, basically an endocrinologist, John Zhang, and his team at New Hope Fertility Center in New York City basically amazed people by announcing the birth of a child to a mom that was carrying a fatal genetic defect.
Okay. So in other words, she had no chance of having a healthy baby, and thanks to this doctor's work, she had a healthy baby?
So far, yes.
Okay.
But it's not without controversy.
Yeah.
Right? So there's obviously, his faction, right? They were willing to proceed with a procedure that I'll explain in a little bit.
Okay.
But they couldn't do it in the U.S. because it's not approved.
Mm-hmm.
Other nations like the U.K. are starting to consider approving it. Same with the U.S. But the main concern is that even though they've, quote unquote, fixed it, right? And initially everything seems great, the same fatal defect can resurface.
Oh.
Later on.
Okay.
So that's ultimately what's kind of slowing the regulation and, allowance of these procedures.
Well, that's fair.
So it comes down to, I guess, mitochondrial replacements.
Okay.
And they ultimately, in this case, combine DNA from 2 women and 1 man to basically go around or bypass the defects and ultimately try and produce a healthy child as a result.
Okay, so I remember hearing about this development, and I got to accuse you of bearing the headline a little bit here. They made a baby out of 3 parents, which, that's a little bit of a glorified headline version of it, right? But the idea was, you had one contributing parent, you had a second contributing parent, and in the places where there was a defect from one of the parents, you used a third DNA source to, in layman's terms, basically patch over the hole, like fix the bad part,
Right.
so that you're then left with fully functional DNA. Everything proceeds. Calling that 3 parents is a little bit of a stretch, but it does at least give you an easy way to understand what's going on in the process, right?
Sure.
So they're now discovering that even if they do this technique, there's a possibility that the bad is going to resurface. The patch doesn't take.
Exactly. So those fatally flawed mitochondria can resurface. Because one, they reproduce so fast. Their reproduction is incredibly fast. And amidst that reproduction, if anything's wrong with them, things can happen.
Right, but that's true of any reproducing cell, right? If you get off by a codon or whatever it is, then there's like 5 different kinds of mutations that here's where everything slipped to the left one, and here's where one just got left out, and here's where everything slipped to the right one, and et cetera,
right.
as like sort of the ways that stuff can go wrong. And these are things that can go wrong in all of us, right? And can cause, cancers or defects or whatever. He says, at the very limit of his knowledge of cellular biology.
So, one thing I definitely learned from this article is that I guess the mitochondria essentially have their own DNA, which is separate from the nuclear genome.
Oh.
So I think, again, based on my knowledge from this article, I think that's where the problems can rise.
Okay. And mitochondria are the energy part of the cell, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
So they reference them or make an analogy like they're like the aliens inside our cells.
Mm-hmm.
They propose like 2 billion years ago, those were the bacteria floating around in the primordial soup, according to them.
Okay.
The very, infancy to me of life to some extent.
That our cells ate and they didn't die.
Right.
Oddly enough, we were talking about this last episode in an unrelated matter. Or they were undigestible, or it became a symbiosis of sorts. And now what we think of as an overall single cell consists of parts that kind of glom together.
Right. So when those mitochondria keep replicating so fast, right? And if so many of them have flaws, it winds up essentially causing the dysfunctions.
See, when I heard about this, I thought it was the nuclear DNA that they were snipping and patching, and my feeling is like, okay, so if we go early enough in the development of a zygote where we're at, 1 cell even, right? Wait, zygote is 1 cell? Man, 9th grade was a long time ago. Anyway, if you start with a fully patched set of DNA, then as your body reproduces and splits out from that first initial cell, you should be okay, I would think. But so this is the weird loophole, is that isn't what they're doing. They're not going in and swapping out DNA inside of your nucleus. They're doing stuff inside the mitochondria. I officially don't know enough in order to appreciate this story. But we can marvel in the progress that's happening here. That step 1, this was even possible to make sort of like to cause a baby to get born, and then then there's these sort of like horrible sci-fi plot where you made a development and it all goes wrong. So has there been a problem with the particular child that came out of the first case, or is it just something that further lab research is kind of causing them to ponder?
From what I recall, no issues. But I think ultimately they're saying that they're not out of the clear, right?
Yeah.
Like the dissenting view from other doctors are like, look, this can resurface, and you're not necessarily you haven't ultimately solved the problem.
Okay, so it's theoretical, and the scientific community feels like they've jumped the gun a little bit in trying to be the first ones to get this to happen. Well, that's understandable, and this is one that we're going to have to pay attention to because there can be almost no doubt that gene splicing is one of the things that will be 21st century. What do you call it? Breakthrough, something the 21st century is known for.
Or disaster.
Disaster, exactly. Ruination of all. We ultimately, pretty much everything we've ever laid out in sci-fi is happening, right? So the whole, what do they call it? The eugenics wars in Star Trek, that was the kind of back plot of Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, was that he was genetically modified, and they had a whole story around it. The only thing that isn't happening correctly in sci-fi's prediction is when it's supposed to happen. We're doing these things hundreds of years earlier than people predicted, basically. So we'll pay attention, and we'll be talking about it here as there's further developments. Good stuff. Welcome to the 21st century. We are in the era of crowdfunding, of co-working. Nobody does anything in the old way in brick and mortar offices, and there's also no point having an old school phone system.
So to make this way easier for your small or growing business, you'll want to bring on board Grasshopper. Hop on and easily get many phone extensions, a PBX in the cloud. Go to goodtalknetwork.com/ads and look for the Grasshopper advertisement. Click on that.
You'll be well on your way to an affordable 21st century communications solution. It's time for segment 2. We're going to do a Let's Hash It Out. And this is where we pick a hashtag that trended in the past week or so, and we hash it out ourselves. The hashtag this time was hashtag CES 2017. For those who don't catch the reference, CES is the Consumer Electronics Super Fun Time show. Is it show? Symposium? It might be
question.
Show. Yeah.
Who knows?
Anyway, it's a Las Vegas gathering of all of the technology releases. So if you're in that field, if you're in that field, you probably already know this because you're listening to our technology podcast, and I don't need to explain it to you. But for anybody who's never heard of it, CES is a time that a lot of the tech companies will sort of tease their cool new things they're going to release this year. It's kind of like Comic-Con, except instead of for superhero movies. Well, and not just superhero movies anymore, all movies, basically. But for gadgets, exactly. For gadgets and for technology breakthroughs, technology trends.
Cars are becoming a dominant theme.
Yeah, that was one of the things that and this is what we're going to do for this segment, is kind of talk through the things that, as we poke around and look at the cool new developments, what we thought was either the trends that it shows us, the fact that this many companies came up with these many things, or just sort of what was the coolest thing from the show this year, from what we could see. I didn't go. We weren't there.
Nope.
But the internet brings us the knowledge.
Hashtag press passes 2018.
Right? CES coordinators, if you're listening to this podcast, then hook us up. We will happily show up and shill ourselves however you need us to, in order to let us appreciate all the technology firsthand. So anyway, this year, secondhand, what were some of the trends and then the super cool standouts for you?
Yeah, I think one trend that stood out is more and more wearables used to be so broad, like Fitbit for health and everything you do, tracking your activity. But now they're I wouldn't necessarily call it a wearable. It's almost like a tag-alongable. It's called Plume, where you actually can wear it, and it tracks the air pollution around you. So, there's a trend of like these wearables becoming even more niche, right? So it's just about pollution no matter where you are. So that's pretty intriguing.
So is it, I feel like that's cool, but it also feels like kind of an add-on to an existing, like that feels like a little dongle I would plug into my Fitbit. Is it its own thing?
Like, it is its own thing. I mean,
how many little wearables do I have to bring with me on a daily basis?
I think, as technology, progresses, things get smaller and smaller, right?
Sure.
So, I think while the plume looks, like a mini cowbell currently, I think it will shrink. And to your point, like, is it a feature or a business, right?
Right.
So, maybe Nike buys them, and your jacket is now the plume.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Well, I think that's where we're going. I think wearables are going to tuck themselves in to things we actually already wear.
Right.
You see this sort of like, put this headband on and it will help you track your emotions or whatever. And it's like, no, I don't wear a circlet of gold around my head on a regular basis, so I'm cool, thanks.
Right.
Whereas, like, we haven't quite got the watch technology right yet, but that's in the realm of things people wear already.
Right. And here's another example, and probably a better example of, something becoming more natural. A company called Motive basically launched a fitness tracking ring. So it literally looks like a wedding ring.
Yeah.
Right? You're not wearing some colored band that might give you a rash like a Fitbit had in the past. It's literally a ring. It looks like a wedding ring. You could probably even, use it as your wedding ring. So things like that become intriguing when they're seamless, and not like some standout accessory.
Plus, it starts to feel more and more like Dungeons and Dragons. Like, I'm just getting my new magic devices, right? And, like, I can have my amulet of tracking air pollution and my ring of heart measurement.
Yeah. And one other, to me...
That was really well done, by the way. Hey, thanks for mentioning Dungeons and Dragons, fool. Congratulations. Here's your to wrap that up.
One other one that stood out to me, Razer, the gaming laptop company, launched, or at least gave a preview of a laptop that weighs close to 12 pounds.
Okay.
Right? So it's hefty, but it has 3 screens.
Oh.
So instead of having like an array of monitors, right, like fastened to your desk and whatnot, like you literally pop out 2 screens from the sides.
Oh, I like it.
Exactly. So... And unfortunately, they're actually stolen, and they were offering a reward to get them back.
For the prototypes?
Yeah.
Oh, man. That's brutal.
Yep. But it's incredibly cool.
Yeah, seriously. I hope it doesn't somehow, not happen because of that. Eric just showed me a picture of the device, and it's super badass. It's exactly what you would imagine, right? Like, you open up a laptop in sort of an HD resolution, and it's like from each side you slide out another screen that just kind of hangs out there in the air. I have, the normal nerds 2-screen array situation set up in my office, and I like it, but I, honest to God, find myself being like, ugh, I only have 2 screens to have all these open tabs on. I think I could easily use 4 screens. I don't think it would be hard for me to get like 6
screens. Yeah.
I would find that completely usable. You got to have a video card that can handle it, obviously, and we're not talking cheap, but I could do it. With CES, it's always kind of, there's some years where you'll kind of like, well, there was this and there was that, and phones are gonna have better cameras next year. There's not really
definitely for years, to your point, it lost its luster,
right?
But now I think it's back, and it, again, like it's more a product of who's attending and what has been invented.
Well, you can't invent something spectacular every single year, as an entire technology industry. But this year it seemed like we were having a lot of trends towards things that it's like, oh, that thing has arrived. Like cars where the car itself has its own iOS, and the interfaces, like smart cars are becoming really a thing now. That we're gonna, I think in 5 years it'll be weird to twiddle a knob in a car,
Right.
as opposed to saying, play that funky music, white boy, or whatever, and having your car respond and do it, or like, hey car, turn down the heat on the passenger side, why don't you? Like, I don't think we're gonna have knobs for these things very much anymore.
So that's a very interesting point. I want to reference a local VC, Matt Mazzio. He does Facebook Lives all the time off his Facebook profile. I follow him.
Mm-hmm.
And he brought up a very good point in his most recent one. I think he did it earlier today. And it was all about how voice is becoming incredibly popular, right?
Sure.
To interact with devices, whether it be a car, your house, Amazon Echo, and whatnot. But his thing was like, you say Amazon or you say Alexa, like those are very easy things to say.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like you're saying Mississippi or, the long words and whatnot. So he's basically saying that brands have to start thinking about like a first and a surname, and think about like how can they...
Oh, interesting.
There's going to be like this race for, usable names, right? Like Sally or Barry or Ben.
That's interesting.
Right? So it's like, even like you go back to like Ask Jeeves, the search engine.
Yeah.
Like, Well, so there's going to be this absolute battle for the easiest names to say.
Right. Or hopefully we don't have to have a proper noun for everything, right? Like I want to be able to say, hey, car.
Well,
and of course, I fully realize that every product manager in the world just panicked and was like, no, you must know the name of my brands.
Well, but he was also saying like, like let's say the brand or, whatever company's name that they want to use is Matt. So you'd be like, send the text to Matt.
Right.
But like if we're passing by and I'm talking to my phone and I'm saying send the text to Matt, you don't know if Matt's a computer, or a person.
Well,
so
and
it gets even stranger.
That's part of why they chose, Alexa, which is a super uncommon name, right?
Yep.
Or we talked about on last week's show, or OK Google, right? Like it's not just Google, so you accidentally say it. It's that full combination of stuff, and yet it's super simple. So it's kind of like the technology side of when URLs first came out, like people grabbed eggs.com or whatever, right? And then we reached kind of a second generation of internet where you had to start making up words and spending $10 million to cause people to be familiar with your made up word, so that you could have some brand identity. He was saying that essentially we're going to look at that, like we're going to get to where there's so many different voice controlling brands that we have to have names for all of them.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a battle for like let's say Facebook, all of a sudden starts using Mark, right? Like if another company started using Mark, bad example, but like a battle would ensue.
It's a little bit different because it's not it's a service mark or a trademark as opposed to a URL where you can claim one, kind of like real estate and squat on it or whatever. This is like, no, I have to prove legally that I've been using this thing, so therefore it's my property. And I don't like it. It reminds me of how, like, if you go to a fast food restaurant, they've branded every product, and so you're forced. You can't, fortunately you can be like, give me number 2 or whatever, but I don't want fries and a drink. I just want the food, and I have to walk in and say, okay, give me a flaming McBroiler half-deviled Dorito burrito, please. Right? And you just want to be like, give me a damn burrito. That's what it's going to say on my gravestone.
Give me a damn burrito.
Exactly.
Make that 2.
Yeah. Anyway, so back to CES. The cars seemed like it was a trend. The phones are kind of kicking along. Yes, there's cool stuff. VR is knocking on the future's door. Certainly, there's not if you've had a chance to demo VR, I think you and I have both had a test drive around the Vive. Is that right?
Yeah.
You did that as well? Man, it's like a holodeck in there, and I love it. And you know, if they can keep going, if they can reach some critical mass, some tipping point, that really is the future. But I didn't see a whole lot of stuff that made me think, oh, huge advances. I think it's still kind of...
a couple things. Like, I think, I don't know if it was Vive itself or an accessory company.
Oculus? Oh.
No, but basically they provided things above and beyond those hand controllers, right? So you could take...
I saw that one. You
this
can kind of
little
have
thing
a
that
gun
you could
with you.
screw
or
onto
whatever.
a baseball bat.
Yeah.
And then you're literally swinging a real baseball bat.
Okay.
And it's tracking it, and you see it on the screen.
Nice.
They also attached it to like guns, and you attach it to many things,
Right.
and it just makes those real objects real within.
I could see that, but I did the. There's only so many games out there, so people who've done Vive probably know what I'm talking about. There's this like you're protecting a space platform, and there's these robots coming and shooting lasers at you, and you have like a gun and a shield, right? And they're being controlled by the same generic controllers. But once I switched to a new app, I actually found myself holding my forearm in front of me as if I still had a shield, right? Because I had just been in a world where that was protecting me from killer robots.
Oh my god!
And something in my body,
VRD.
Exactly. Well, I mean, when I looked in the direction of my arm, there was a shield there, right? And when I held that up, it caused lasers to bounce off onto robots in a faux life and death situation. So yeah, when I moved to the next thing, I felt almost like I didn't. There wasn't weight, but
Right.
I was kind of holding my forearm up still with a little curve in my wrist, even though the only thing that was actually there was the controller. I found myself like it tricked my brain well.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, I guess it's cool to carry a gun, but I don't know if you need it.
Right.
Other trends, so yeah, phones just kind of kicking along. Cars, next steps, that's all good. I've seen a lot of folks say that robots, and personal assistants, the Alexas, and their brethren are really kind of the standout thing from this year.
Right. And just going back to vehicles for a second, I don't recall if Honda brought their motorcycle to CES or just rode the coattails of CES, but they basically have a motorcycle and demonstrated a motorcycle where it stays upright
By itself.
By itself. So the rider can literally stand on it, not even hold the handlebars, and it's going to balance. Furthermore, it can follow its rider.
Is this the Honda Riding Assist?
Yeah. So it can follow.
Engadget called it Best of CES 2017 for disruptive tech.
That's interesting. So it can follow the rider when the rider's off it to go park.
Oh, weird.
Which is awesome.
That's amazing. I mean, that's just like, that feels like a little puppy that you've been hanging out with. Like, okay, I'll go park myself. That's fantastic. At last, the Knight Rider days are upon us. The one quirky one that I loved that I thought has potential to be kind of the underrated disruptor of the whole conference this year, and maybe of our decade, if I haven't blown it up too much, is this device that attaches to your trash can, and as you throw things out, it scans the universal product code, much like you would scan, your groceries on the way out, and it just builds your grocery list for you in your app. Hey, we're out of pickles. And therefore, the next time you go to the grocery store, it's there. And it knows because you threw it away. Which is so elegant and so simple, right?
That is
like,
smart.
we could have done that 10 years ago.
Right.
Well, that's not true. We didn't have the phones 10 years ago to kind of hook up the other side. But it could have sent it, theoretically to the internet, and you printed out a list or whatever. But the UPC stuff has been around for some time. Yep. And just this application of like, where we need one of those? The trash can. Like,
that's so true. Amazon Prime would love that.
Oh, yeah.
Good Lord.
I assume that this is so Genie Can is the name of the company. I have to assume that Genie Can
is going to be acquired.
Not a brand name that we need to go ahead and make sure that we write down, because someone's going to buy that. Yeah,
or
exactly.
just make their own and circumvent any patents they have.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously Amazon is a prime, if you'll forgive the pun candidate, as somebody who would have a strong interest in that kind of stuff. But it's just this little device that kind of slips onto the front of your trash can, and I mean, it's no self-parking motorcycle, but it is kind of like, yeah. It's got the right amount of wow factor,
right,
and the right amount of like, oh, you actually solved a problem. So that's maybe my vote for the coolest thing I saw. I didn't see everything, but
right. Yeah, I would definitely pick the motorcycle as the coolest.
There you have it. It's been decided. Aren't you happy that you listen to the Diginauts so that you know motorcycles that park themselves and garbage cans that email you about what you need to get from the store?
Hey, thanks for listening. I'd thank you even more if you went to iTunes, find our podcast, give us a rating, give us a review, and help other people find us too. So, in legal news, or our segment Jurisprudent, a well-known blog in the tech community called Tech Dirt, run by Mike Masnick, he goes very deep into technology, especially law, and kind of the intersection of those. And it's really the first time he's entered into a lawsuit as a result of some of the things he's written. And he got into trouble because I guess there's an alleged self-proclaimed inventor of email. And that person has essentially filed a lawsuit against Mike Masnick of Tech Dirt because Mike has significantly questioned this person's role in inventing email.
Okay.
Now, what's also notable about this is that the lawyer basically representing the person who filed the suit is Charles Harder. And if you don't recognize that name, you should, because he was involved in the Hulk Hogan Gawker case and obviously involved with Peter Thiel. So by no means is this plaintiff messing around.
Yeah, he's bringing the big guns, the big sleaze, as it were, to bear. I mean, I guess everybody has their right to exist in our ecosystem where they need to. Clearly, he made some money by going after the. Now, this was the case where there was a personal grudge, or no, I'm confusing the other.
So let me give you the background,
yeah.
Right? So Shiva Ayadurai, he filed a $15 million libel lawsuit in Massachusetts against Mike Masnick, Lee Beaton, and Tech Dirt's parent company now, Floor 64. Okay. And essentially it was related to articles that doubted Ayudurai's claim to have invented email. And it goes all the way back to September of 2014, where an article was written and it was headlined, why is Huffington Post running a multi-part series to promote the lies of a guy who pretended to invent email? Mm-hmm. So definitely incendiary from the start, right? But, I guess Shiva took offense to that. So the article went on to question Ayudurai's, alleged creation of a fake story that he supposedly invented email at the University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey back in 1978.
Okay.
Now, I guess in the case of defamation, truth becomes a way to defend yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So this is basically diving into the history of email and who really invented it.
Right. So with libel law, you can say what you want about somebody. They can then choose to sue you if they want.
Right.
Hey, this guy over here, he's mean. I am not mean. And this can go to court over something as simple as, obviously that's not, but I'm trying to break it down and make it simple. But if you can demonstrate in fact the person is mean, then there's no problem for the person who said he's mean, because all they did was state a fact. So if you can demonstrate that it's a fact, you're okay as far as libel is concerned. So I guess that would be kind of what's going on underneath this case is, did dude invent email or not? Right? Because, he's bringing a defamation case saying, hey, why are you calling me a liar? I guess, right?
Exactly.
So the question is he or is he not a liar?
Yep. And therein lies the debate.
So what do we know? Did he invent email? Do we know anything about it?
So from Masnick's perspective, and I'll quote some of Masnick's writing now, Masnick wrote, by all accounts, it was perfectly decent email system that allowed the dental school staff to send electronic messages, right? No one doubts that in 81, Ayudari registered the copyright on his program, which was called email. But Masnick's problems with that are the following. One, according to Masnick, email was invented long before 1978. Two, the copyright is merely on the specific software code, not the idea of email. And then lastly, Masnick wrote, Ayudari may have, recreated the basics of email and even added some features to that. But from Masnick's point of view, it was never even remotely related to what later became the actual standards of email. And then Masnick really has a problem with Ayudari's quote-unquote PR campaign, where Ayudari claims that no one would believe that a dark-skinned immigrant kid who's 14 years old at the time invented email, and that he basically accomplished this in one of the poorest cities in the U.S. rather than coming out of, a famous university.
Oh, see, I feel like that's exactly who invents email, but I guess that's just me. Okay, so, yeah. So it's an interesting, we would have to do a lot of proper reporting to get down to the...
Yeah, so here's what's interesting and likely why Harder is involved. So, as you recall, Gawker had to take down some of their sites and their content as a result of the lawsuits that they lost to Hulk Hogan.
Mm-hmm. Including the sex tape?
Well, not sure. I would imagine.
Sure.
Univision wound up acquiring Gawker's assets, and amidst the bankruptcy, and they pulled stories, including Ayudari's. Okay.
Oh.
So, that, from what the Hollywood Reporter is saying, Masnick basically started, writing about this scenario again, and he basically coined the piece called "Ridiculous. Nick Denton settles remaining Charles Harder lawsuits, agrees to delete perfectly true stories." Basically, I guess within that article, rekindling Ayudari and the email situation.
Okay.
So, there's definitely ties between, the two cases to some extent.
You can see how it wound up being this group of people who brought this case.
Right.
Well, I think it's kind of ridiculous because clearly Al Gore hadn't invented the internet yet. His claim. So it sounds like he, at least, depending on who you believe, it sounds like he didn't so much invent email, but he took what existed in email. He did what was probably an admirable job of building a program out of the pieces of what was already around.
Right.
Probably added a lot of improvements to the technology. Also happened to call it email.
Right. That's interesting in its own right.
Right. And then get some kind of intellectual property ownership of the word, which wasn't even a word. So that kind of strengthens his case. But then is turning around and making a bit of a grander claim, taken at face value. And again, we can't. This is where we'll say alleged a lot, because we don't have the full story here. But it definitely is weird to kind of, just do a little web search on this guy, right? And, his Wikipedia page says, and who knows, right? Wikipedia's truthy, as Stephen Colbert says, but It says that he has 4 degrees from MIT, including a PhD in biological engineering, and he's a Fulbright scholar. So, he's qualified to have, contributed. It sounds like he, like I say, it existed, and he maybe kind of codified it, gave it a name, and there you go. But we don't know that. He's making the claim. Also, interestingly, evidently married to Fran Drescher from The Nanny. Sure. And then his, I think, official website, talks about him and pretty much makes the claim that he is the inventor of, well, now this is interesting. He's the inventor of email, and it's in all capital letters. So he's not claiming lowercase email. He's claiming email.
Interesting.
It's perhaps not being super forthcoming, right? He's kind of building on people's assumptions by making that claim. But if he's using all capital letters, he may be attempting to clarify a little bit that he invented a system that has this proper name as opposed to the whole thing. Well, we'll let them duke it out between themselves in the courts. I'm sure somebody will get millions of dollars from somebody, and it won't be me. But if there's developments, we will let all of you know about it. If you're considering a career change, consider ostraining.com. They have classes up in all the different platforms you might be interested in: Joomla, Drupal, Angular, etc., etc. Go learn web technology. Go get a new high-paying job. You heard it here. Go to goodtalknetwork.com/ads, click on the OS Training banner, and reinvent your life, why don't you? Okay, it's segment 4, and that means it's time that we dig some more. All of our stories that we talk about on this show, because we're talking about the razor edge of cutting, bleeding edge technology and science breakthroughs in our society. They're constantly changing, so we like to come back and revisit the topics when developments happen. And we've started with a rundown of environmental news for the last few. It's what I'm calling Darren's official omnibus offerings of Mother Earth dispatches, or Doomed. And this week in Doomed, there's an article in the New York Times with the headline, Donald Trump denies climate change, these kids die of it. And it's investigative journalist Nicholas Kristof. He goes to Madagascar, where drought has basically left them with cactuses on their island. Wells are running up, cattle are starving, and kids are starving. It's an interesting story to kind of look at. It's sort of looks like another one of those, like, hey, there's some bad times happening here, we are the world kind of things. But
so are they breaking open the cactuses to drink?
It's like one of the only available food sources. The cactuses are able to withstand the drought conditions, and therefore it's vegetation that they can boil and eat. It doesn't have, the nutritive value that they need, but it's at least they can eat something. So not a happy story. And he kind of interviews some people, and they don't necessarily even know who Donald Trump is or what America is. But that was kind of part of the reporter's point of view, is that we're causing this. They don't even know about us. They just kind of are experiencing this massive shift in how they can live on their island. We can probably expect that they're not the last place that is going to see some big changes. Because here's another, this is a Washington Post article. It's talking about NOAA, the National Oceanic Aero something administration, the weather guys, the government weather guys. The headline says that they challenged the global warming pause. Now new research says that the agency was correct to challenge the pause. If you paid attention to this, as I understand the story, there was a moment of Republican victory a few years back where they essentially caught government scientists tweaking the numbers. And they're like, see, you're trying to make global warming look worse than it is. Global climate change look worse than it is. And the study that just came out, I'm pretty sure I'm interpreting this correctly. It says, yeah, they were tweaking the numbers to make up for like measurement bias, collaboration bias. Well, and what the study has proven, there's a quote towards the end of what the Washington Post reported. I'm not going to find it right now, but it was something like, we have robustly proven that they were correct to make those adjustments.
Yeah, right.
And everybody else who's reporting on this should also make the same adjustments. They're pretty much saying like, no. There's not a slowdown. They weren't faking the numbers just to make it, look bigger. If you look at what has happened in 2014, 2015, and 2016, you can see that the little kind of correction is still on trend. It's not some pause in global warming. It's not a reversal of like, oh, good, we peaked back in 2008 and we're all done. It's like, nope, we're still fucked. And if that isn't enough evidence, here's a satellite that tracks icebergs. It says that a giant 5,000 square kilometer iceberg is set to calf from Antarctica.
I think that would, if that melts, right? I think that would raise the sea by like 4 inches. Is that right?
So this one?
I thought so. I could be wrong, but
I don't think you're going to get one iceberg like that causing it. I think those are levels more for like if we lose Greenland or whatever, because they've done estimates, and this is one of the places where if you talk to somebody who says everything's debatable, it's very debatable how much the loss of an iceberg is going to overall impact water levels, for example. Because there's various measurements, right? The iceberg is trapping water to begin with, but it's also as a giant white thing at the edge of the world, right? It is also reflecting sunlight back up into the sky. So as they melt, that reflection factor goes away, which in turn causes the oceans to absorb more heat,
right,
which in turn melts more ice, and it is a giant cyclical feedback problem. So the fact that we're seeing and who knows, maybe this one iceberg calving is would have been fine, no big deal. The icebergs do fall off of the ice floes on a regular basis.
This is a big one.
But this is a big one, and it's not the first big one, so it's worrisome. As I say, we are doomed. I honestly don't think so. I think we're going to find a way to trap carbon. I think we're going to reverse effects. I think we're going to be able to get ahead. No, I don't think we're going to be able to get ahead of it. I think the damage is going to get done before we finally prioritize the way we could have been prioritizing all along.
Doomed.
But we'll see. Yeah, well, exactly. I guess that is a form of doomed. But anyway, in the dig some more part today, I wanted to talk about automation and the end of human work. We've talked a little bit about all these different automation trends and the fact that they, for example, we last week mentioned that truck drivers in particular seem like an endangered species.
Yeah, ripe for annihilation.
I've seen, we spoke with some folks on social media about this over the course of the last week, and there definitely were people who thought, both sides of that issue. There were definitely folks that were like, no, it's a skilled, you're always going to need that skill. It seems like people kind of thought, yeah, you're going to replace fleets of drivers, but you're going to need highly skilled drivers to be able to come in special situations, which, yeah, that's fine. That doesn't, to me, reverse.
Yeah, you're not going to need as many as are displaced by these autonomous trucks.
Not by a long shot. So.
And, these trucks can drive all night. Humans are restricted to certain hours, even though sometimes they don't follow those hours, which makes it even more dangerous for them and consumers. But
well, and that was brought up as well, that there were a lot of people who were like, you know what, good riddance. You know, and obviously, I wouldn't condone any celebration of loss of job for anybody, right? That's not our point of view on it. But people brought that up, and that was their point, was kind of, you know, the roads aren't safe because of the way people go about this, and it's not even necessarily, to your point, the truck driver's fault. Always, it's sometimes much more about the conditions of the industry, that they feel they need to work those hours to be able to pull off what they need to pull off.
Right.
But I know, you know, for me and my wife, we go visit her family in Northern California frequently, and we don't take I-5 anymore after a trip where we felt like we nearly died several times, right? And it's because that's the truck route. So we take the 101 now, even though it means a couple extra hours of enduring screaming children, you know? So,
wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's something to be said for that, too. Anyway.
Maybe you need an autonomous car to avoid.
You bet. Sign me the hell up. You know, by all means, if that car can keep me alive and you know, I can play video games the whole way up, you betcha. Did I tell you, by the way, we just went for Christmas up to my mother-in-law's, and when I was in the town of San Luis Obispo, I don't know if I said this on the show or not, I saw an autonomous test vehicle in an intersection, and what was happening actually was we were crossing the street, and it was getting ready to make a left turn into the crosswalk where we were. So it was an interesting moment of like,
game on,
host of a technology and society podcast. How much faith do you have?
So wait, was there a driver in the seat?
So there was a driver and a passenger. So they very much seemed like they were doing, you know, testing, right? I mean,
what kind of car was this?
I don't remember the make and model. It was a sedan.
Was it all zebraed? Like,
No, it had writing on the side that said autonomous test vehicle. Wow. But in all other ways, it looked like a car. It had maybe one of those little globy things coming out of the ceiling. So it was doing some looking.
Might have been a Ford Focus. Not a Focus, Fusion.
I believe you, actually. That feels like the right kind of what kind of car it was, but who knows. Anyway, there was an interesting moment because I'm holding my little toddler's hand, right? And, you know, for whatever reason, even though I do fundamentally believe that within a few years, that's going to be the safest way for people to get around, I put my body in front of my child out of a sense of like, oh no, let's fear this thing that's pointing at us. There was absolutely no reason to, you know, but I almost feel like I was racist against the robot.
You're robotist.
in that moment. Yeah, exactly. I was a robotist.
I wonder, like, if it didn't have those markings on it, right? Would you have?
I would not have known.
Right.
I might have noticed the weird little bubble on top. But I honestly probably wouldn't have. It was the writing on the side that was what alerted me, because it had two passengers and it was a car. There was no, you know, extraneous gear going along with it. Anyway, so
that's interesting.
My point is that, you know, with truck driving, yeah, it's inevitable. Whether it happens in 2 years or 20 years, it's going to happen. And so, you know, I think that's kind of the only point we've made. We haven't made any claims beyond that, really. But we just know that a time is coming when a lot of people are going to be put out of work. And there were a few stories this week that backed that up. One was the Google revealed that they have been quietly challenging the world's best Go players. Go is the predominantly Asian game that is played with little black and white tiles. I have no idea how it's played. It's meant to be like incredibly complex, you know, chess with a ton more variation, permutations or whatever. And so it's kind of been the benchmark of like Sure, you can teach a computer to play chess and be better than a human, but only a human can master the sort of art of Go, if that makes sense. I think that's the thinking. It's probably mathematically just that it's a more complex permutation game. But they last year built an AI that took out the number 2 player in the world. And in the online Go community, there was a account that was going by the pseudonym of Master and quietly like just going up the charts challenging people, and then they finally revealed that in fact it was their AlphaGo program.
Wow.
And so they
kind
took
of interesting
out
that they
everybody,
chose
including the
not
best.
to disclose and then disclose.
It's a little bit of a Turing test, I'm sure, to some level. Like, you know, although who knows what the Go interface is, whether you felt like you were playing another human or not. But yeah, also, I mean, does it change a player's game if they know they're playing against a human versus playing against a computer? Yeah, I agree with you. There's kind of nuances to that side of things, what they proved by choosing to do it this way. It may have been one of those things where they just didn't want to say that they were doing it because they didn't want to mess with their own data until they had the evidence that they wanted. So, but that's, you know, kind of...
But, like, is that right?
Oh, who knows?
You know what I mean?
Oh, ethically?
Yeah.
I don't see anything personally about it because it's an online gaming community.
But, like, imagine if it was poker.
Sure. For money or for honor?
Well, I mean, for money would be illegal, right? But...
Well, some places. Yeah, I mean, like, I play Hearthstone's Blizzard's little card game sometimes, and you play against another person in that.
So you think.
Well, and that's my point, is if they had AIs playing half the time because they couldn't always pair people up properly. Right. So if they, you know, I could very much imagine that they might have something in place where if it takes more than 20 seconds to pair you up, they instead run you against the computer, and you don't really need to know. You can't communicate with the people other than these 6 little emotions you can express, which is probably intentional. But my point is, I don't think I would know. I think I would win or lose about the same amount because it's both a strategy game and a card game. There's luck involved. So I mean, I guess I think of the ethics of that, and that doesn't feel like an offense to me. Now, my identity isn't wrapped around being one of the best players in the world. So those guys may very well feel
keep practicing
differently. Yeah, exactly. Anyway, what I'm getting to is then there's another story that robots are now really stealing jobs as a Japanese firm replaces staff with AI. This was reported on nextweb.com, and the idea behind it is that this firm actually replaced humans who were insurance adjusters, which is kind of thought of it. I mean, it's certainly a very statistically driven field, but you know, the actual job involves reviewing medical cases and all that kind of stuff in order to calculate the insurance payouts. And I guess this company, Fukoku Mutual, they replaced a force of about 30 humans with AIs. They are expecting a 30% increase, which amounts to about $1.2 in savings.
Wow.
It doesn't say annually, but I'm assuming that's annually.
Better not be monthly.
Yeah. So what this author is putting forward is the idea that, like, yeah, it's inevitable and it's a trend, but this was kind of a tipping point moment of, like, we're not replacing the guy who moves a wrench and then goes to the next place on
right.
it, right? Like, we're replacing humans who do things that we think of as human. both in the Go playing situation and in the insurance adjusting situation. And that lands me on the news out of Finland, where at the beginning of this year, they rolled out an experimental basic income for some of their citizens. And this is the idea. I saw an interview with Elon Musk where they kind of asked him, hey, if all these jobs are getting replaced, they kind of were pointing at him as, you're the guy who's creating more new jobs than anybody,
right,
and you're innovating. And I guess he's within his companies, they're pretty good at, as they phase somebody out, they try to find another role for that talent within their organization, et cetera, et cetera. But they were asking him about, like, okay, if everybody gets replaced by robots, what do we do? And he had enough time to say, well, we're going to need some kind of minimum basic income. And you and I have talked about this a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it becomes intriguing, right? Because it almost makes money almost useless, right? So, like, let's say the majority of the population is unemployed, and people are getting, every country decides to give people whatever.
Yeah.
Right? But it's effectively like, if you gave them nothing, like, people would still live. You know, it's like, it's this fake.
Well,
like,
I mean, and that's the interesting thing, right, is to take it to the extreme where tax money goes into a government and then comes back to a citizenry at a full 100% unemployment, right? Then nothing happened anywhere, right? And you don't have an economy anymore,
yeah,
right?
which I candidly think money is always comical. It's just an unfortunate necessity at the moment. But I think when it gets to that point where everyone's getting like a base ante or a base something, it almost negates the point of money.
Well, so we need to look into the Finland case a little bit more to finish up on your comment. But before we do that, I mean, I guess I would say that money exists to facilitate barter, right? Like that's where it came from. Mm-hmm. The idea that somebody's got something that they want to trade, and there was a time when, hey, I'll give you this knife in exchange for those potatoes that you saved, right, or whatever.
Yep.
And whether it's a time shifting thing, right, like my wheat is ready in winter and your potatoes are ready in the fall, so I'll give you these potatoes, and here's a piece of paper that stands in place of those potatoes. Oh, and by the way, you can trade that piece of paper with somebody else, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And, obviously, it's a whole thing. You can go through the history of currency, and Amsterdam used tulip bulbs and all sorts of weirdness that goes around the concept of money. But there is a fundamental underlying purpose for how we got here, but the question becomes like, but if you look at where we're going, do we continue to need it? I would argue that iniquity is part of money inherently, that you need money partly because somebody has something and somebody doesn't, right? If you go to straight trade barter, you don't need money because somebody has wine and somebody else has furs, and it's all just about the price, right? And money frees that up to move more freely. Anyway, what they did in Finland is they picked 2,000 citizens, so it's just a trial program, and they said, okay, you guys, we're going to give you 560 euros every month. We're going to call that your basic income.
And it's irrespective of employment.
And that's the important part of this. So I guess the problem they're trying to solve is they're trying to take away the disincentives of a standard welfare type program.
So you're saying they're going to look to see, of the ones who are receiving it, who are employed, will they stop working, right?
Correct. And part of it is the idea underlying it is, I guess Finland's benefits program is actually pretty complicated, so that's part of the problem. And one of the things that they're doing is they fear that people won't take part-time work. because they think that if they take the part-time work, then they won't get the normal unemployment because they're not unemployed anymore.
Yeah.
Right? So especially in our gig economy world, yeah, you might be able to make $100 doing a half day's work, but if you do nothing, you might make 120 as your baseline. So what they're saying is you get this 560 euros a month whether you work or not. Therefore, the incentive comes back to go work that half day. That's the theory.
So you could make more?
So you can make more because you get the 560 whether you work or not.
Right.
So now suddenly you might as well go work because you get to keep what you make. Or not. Well, and that's the experiment, right? So, I mean, and obviously there's different political opinions on this. It's a hot button, and the same is true in Finland. There's plenty of people who think that, yeah, what's going to happen is that's just going to increase the laziness. I guess one of the advantages of what they're doing is it makes all the red tape go away because you don't have to prove anything. You don't have to, if you've ever done unemployment in America, you usually have to do like either training courses or document how many jobs you applied for or whatever kind of, administration. And that administration stuff has a cost. So that goes away under this. It's like, oh, you're one of the people? Here's your money.
How'd they pick these people, did they say?
I believe it was random. Random out of like the people who are already receiving some kind of benefits. Yeah, 2,000 randomly picked citizens who received unemployment benefits already. So, again, it's just an experimental program. But it's interesting to juxtapose that with the idea of, well, if nobody's working, right? If the robots replace everybody, in theory, we have a future of high unemployment coming, right? But, there's also the Amazon in the sky thing we were talking about last week where, okay, if the warehouse doesn't have warehouse workers and no security guards and nobody's driving the trucks that bring things to the warehouse, it's just robots that stock the goods and send the goods and drop it off on somebody's door, then how does anybody have any money to pay for the goods to begin with?
I was just going to say that, right? Like, because if everyone's making the same base, right?
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, it gets really weird.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
but then who winds up with the money, right? Like, if Amazon, right? So fast forward to a world where most people are unemployed and there's basic income, right? So then it becomes like, machine versus machine trying to optimize to get the most money from the people. There's a fixed set of money.
Right, but then that money would accumulate in the hands of the few people who have jobs.
This
comes back to my point that inequity is necessary in money. Because in the 560 euros per month that they're giving out is in comparison with the standard Finnish private sector earnings of, he says, scouring the internet trying to see if he can find it. I don't have the exact number, but it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,000, right? So so folks who are, if you chose laziness as your path and said, nah, I'm cool, I'll just take this, that's fine, but you're making like 4 times less than people who are reporting to jobs.
How long are they doing this?
I believe it was a 2-year program. And they're, again, they're just kind of trying to see, which,
I guess, what do they consider a success or a failure, right?
Well, it seems like it might be a little more pure science than that. They just want to see that, like, okay, out of the 2,000 people, how many people then report that they chose to work, or how many people, I would assume that it might come with a certain amount of like, we're giving you this, but you have to fill out this survey. I mean, that's what I would do.
Interesting, right?
And so they might be testing satisfaction, happiness. There's not a lot of information about exactly all of the underpinnings. But I think that's kind of got to be what they're doing, right? So they are doing this as a test. Some of the politicians, of course, are opposed.
Right.
Some politicians are talking about, and then maybe we expand to sort of low income people who are underemployed, freelancers who don't have a full docket of work, and see kind of how that works with them, people who are already trying to work. So it's kind of an interesting, again, it depends on your politics. You could make the argument that it's capitalism and you're just letting government administration help capitalism run better. Now, there's plenty of people who will take that statement and shit all over it, and I don't blame them. I get it. But I mean, my point is that this government isn't doing this because they want to become a government where everybody gets money all the time. They're trying to take their relatively high 8% unemployment rate and fix it. I just think it's interesting to look at it in the context of the looming potential displacement of human workers.
Yep.
So we'll be paying attention to it, and certainly we want to have conversation with you, our audience, about it, and we'll let you know more as more things happen. If you've been listening to us for the past several weeks, you know that we've gotten this podcast onto iTunes and that we could really use your help. If this is your first time listening to Diginauts, congratulations, welcome! You probably found it because somebody before you left a rating on iTunes. What do you say? Pay it forward, pay it backward, pay it whichever direction it takes for us to be able to reach more people. Go to iTunes, in the store, click on ratings and reviews, give it a star rating, and then just leave a couple of words. It does a lot to help the algorithms, help people find us. We greatly appreciate it. Okay, last segment today. We're going to do a semantically incorrect. We've only done it once before. This was for, if you remember, I said I didn't like listening to audiobooks as a big funky phrase. I suggested a-booking. Yeah,
no.
which Eric doesn't like. And if we're honest, this segment exists because of me. Eric is far more pragmatic than me. He's like, we have words for that already. Shut up. And whereas I need the words to say what they actually say. I need perfection from my words.
So have you perfected the
a-booking one?
Yes.
I think a-booking is fantastic. Now, we get some suggestions from the audience here and there about that last one that you don't necessarily. Whatever. We'll go into it later. It's fair to say that listening to an audiobook is still out there as something that we would love feedback on. What do you call it when you quote unquote read a book, but you didn't read it, right? Oh, I read that. No, you didn't.
It was read to you.
And we need a word that's able to exist in all tenses, right? That's able to so if I follow the example I just did, no, you didn't read it. You a-booked it. Yeah. But people, again, email back before it was invented by our friend from the earlier segment, allegedly. Email wasn't a phrase people used.
Right.
It's adding an initial in order to make a distinction, and then it's using an existing verb noun to be able to verb noun about a new thing, and we get it now. So I think the same thing's true for a-booking. But let's leave a-booking alone. We're going to come to my next nitpick that I already know that Eric's going to be like, we don't need a word for that.
Oh, God.
And you're right, we don't, but I want one. All right, let me paint a scenario for you.
Go ahead, Picasso.
You're in a meeting. It's just started. It's been on your calendar all week. You show up. 4 people are there. But the tech guy who's always busy hasn't shown up yet. What happens?
Cancel the meeting.
Do you have the meeting? Do you walk away?
Fire him.
You sit around for 5 minutes twiddling your thumbs?
It's not a 5-er, it's a 15-er.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I have gotten out of meetings using the 15-minute rule, the 10-minute rule, and the 5-minute rule, depending on, which company I'm working for and what their culture is and all that. But a 10-minute rule is a pretty generic, like, if the key players aren't here at 10 minutes, we have to reschedule the meeting. Anyway, what will always happen in about minute 4 is the project manager will say, well, hang on, let me ping him and see if he's around. I hate the fact that we use ping to mean what it means in that context. Now,
would you prefer zap?
Absolutely. Oh my God, I would absolutely prefer zap.
Oh,
right? Because
no.
I'm kidding. I would if zap were the convention that we used, I would probably be holding this semantically incorrect about zap right now, because it has the same problems that ping does, in that it has a meaning already. And obviously we have words that pick up multiple meanings all the time, but there's a level of accuracy that there's a reason that we don't do the sort of 1984 double speak, dumb it down to the simplest, double plus big, right? There's nuances in the different words, and you understand the difference between humongous and large, right? I actually take objection, if I can be a word nerd for another minute, to things like I get that it has to do with perceptions and changing social thoughts and all that, but like, for example, waitress and waiter changing to server. I don't love that. And it's not in any. I don't find either of them more respectful to the people, and I think it communicates less information. A waitress and a waiter have gender attached to them.
But do you need to know the gender? No.
What does it hurt?
Well, I think here's why server is becoming used more often, right? Like, if I say server, it's like gender neutral, right? But if I call a waitress a waiter, or a waiter a waitress, that gets weird. Fair
enough. So it's all tied into all the other gender evolution, I guess. It's the wrong word, obviously. Which, again, I hate the fact that I don't have the right word for that. But anyway, back to ping. I have seen people say, let me ping him, and it typically means let me use our company's IM system of whatever form that means. But some people will just shoot over an email, in which case I'm like, then why didn't you just say, let me email him, right? Because you're communicate what you actually mean, right? And ping is so randomly, like, I get that there's sort of a genetic, because you think about the evolution of ping, right? So it starts as ping. It's an onomatopoeia for tapping a glass.
But
right?
It's also like you can ping an IP address to see if it's alive.
You jumped a step. So before that, it's submarines using sonar.
That's fair.
Right, to find out if there's other submarines in their water space. So they send out the sound wave, and then the computer goes ping if there's a return from the signal they sent out, which then got adopted in the internet by people who did the same thing. They would send a packet to a server, and if the server were awake, it would send it back. So it's what I like about that is that analogy is kind of, at least it directly correlates. And I can see why people sort of moved that over into messaging. Let me ping my coworker to see if she's there. It's kind of like you're sending out a sonar and hoping to get something back, but it's not really the same. Like,
it's an analogy.
But it's so gross. Why don't we just say, let me message the person?
It's shorter.
But anyway, the point of the story is it ties into another communication technology issue, and that is talking to somebody. So I find myself frequently referencing a quote-unquote conversation I had with somebody where maybe it was an email exchange, or maybe it was Facebook Messenger, or Snapchat, or whatever that we were communicating on. I don't use Snapchat. That was me trying to sound hip.
But you friended me recently.
I did.
Liar.
Well, you're like my one Snapchat friend. Anyway, the point of the story is that like you'll then be communicating to somebody else in proper conversation. Oh, actually, I talked to him yesterday, right? But you didn't talk to them. It's in that same world of the A-booking thing, right? You communicated with them. I think we need a word that represents I communicated electronically with the person, and then we could use it for ping.
Okay. Do you have a proposed solution?
I don't. Oh, sorry. As I was saying it,
Big letdown.
hang on. What started to come into my head was something like, and this is the part where I have the build up and then I say it and everybody's like, oh, no. But I'll start and then our audience will solve it for us. As I was saying it, I was like, you're communicating electronically, you're e-comming somebody or something like that. No, I don't like that at all. It sounds too much like econ or e-commerce or whatever, right? Like it's not the right thing. I'm once again solving a problem by just attaching a letter to an existing kind of word. But I think we need something that says, I had a conversation with a person and it was not a face-to-face interaction. I'm not going to specify that I texted or I emailed or I tweeted.
So medium agnostic.
Perhaps medium agnostic, because we generally have words for contacting people in all those other mediums. And I think that's why ping exists, because it's kind of filling a gap for we don't really use message to refer to whatever our company's system is that we use to chat with somebody. It's kind of feels like chat. It's not really chat. It's text messaging. It's whatever you want to call it. So I think that's why people don't gravitate towards, I messaged my colleague. She messaged me back, right? So I think that problems of communication would be solved if we had, much like A-booking, where it's like, no, you didn't read it, but you accomplished the same delivery of message via another route. If we had one via, a new future-y electronic route, if we had something that spoke to communication that was handled via some technique other than the standard. Who's going to solve it for us? I'm hoping that somebody listening to this right now is jumping up and down with an idea in their head and they're going to share it, and that we will then be able to relay that back to the audience for approval. Do you like A-booking for audio? Eric is not shaking his head back and forth from the moment I said it. I wasn't asking you. I'm asking the good people listening to us. Does it solve a problem for you? Is there a problem to begin with? Same thing with ping and talking. Are those issues that matter to you? And hit us up with your opinions on everything we talked about today. Do you think that we're heading to a moneyless society where nobody works? What do you think our future looks like? We would absolutely love to hear from you on that, on environmentalism, et cetera, et cetera. Anything we talked about today, you can find us on the internet. Eric, you are
at eFader.
And I am at Digital Darren, which is spelled D-E-R-O-N for some reason. And you can certainly reach us via phone, 323-686-8255. You can leave a message there, and we would happily play it as part of the show. Or at Good Talk Network is our other Twitter handle for the network itself. Let us hear from you. We would love to involve you in the conversation. We'll have more technology and society coming you from the Diginauts soon. Thanks everybody for listening. Good talk.